Seranno is Imperial occupied. We've stayed off the Empire's radar since Camino. Why chance it now?
Because the contents of just one of those containers would be worth more than all the jobs you pulled for me combined. You can buy your freedom.
We're already free.
It's cute you think that. Clearly you're not paying attention to what's happening out there, but I am. It's only a matter of time before the Empire comes here, and then my little operation is over. Which means no more jobs for you.
She does have a valid point.
You want to really be free? Then pull off this heist, and you'll have the means to disappear. No more risky missions, no more living hand to mouth. You can have a future. Isn't that what you're after?
Greetings, Bucketheads. Mavar Tigar. Welcome to the 185th Bad Batch Beguiling episode of Mandivision. Nargai Tom, and thank you so much for checking out this small independent Star Wars podcast. We're so glad you're here. The best way to reach out to this show is, of course, on social media. We are at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show at mandivisiontom@gmail.com. Please be sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share this show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. Well, it's happened. It's January 2023. The new year is upon us, and that means The Bad Batch has returned to our streaming platform known as Disney Plus, our preferred method of watching Star Wars, because it's basically the only place you can watch Star Wars. But we're excited. I'm so glad the show came back. It feels like a really long time since we've been with The Bad Batch. So it was interesting to kind of connect back. I didn't double back and rewatch any of season 1 of the series, much to my chagrin. So it did take me a beat or two to kind of remember how the show ended. Obviously, I remember the orbital bombardment of Topeka City on Camino, but I thought they left their relationship with Crosshair in a different place. So it took me a minute to sort of process that and figure that all out. So I did a little bit of catching up in those first moments of the series, watching these new episodes. But yeah, we got a 2-part episode to kick things off on what I expect will be an even better, more ambitious second season of Star Wars: The Bad Batch. And I can't wait to talk to you all about this show and tracking the progress of Hunter, Wrecker, Tech, Echo, and of course Omega. And I'm assuming Crosshair will join the party at some point in this season, though not in these first 2 episodes. And yeah, I don't know. Star Wars animation, it seems to have the trend in animated Star Wars, at least under the reign of Dave Filoni, has been that the second season is where things really start to pick up, and we get to get into some really interesting story elements. And with the Bad Batch being set when it is, and that first season, very much the transition from the Republic to the Empire. We're still very much in that in season 2, even though the Empire's more entrenched and getting more entrenched as every day that goes on. We're covering a lot of ground, touching base with planets and people and cultures, I suppose, from the Republic era and how they are being challenged in this the beginning of the dark time, the beginning of the Empire. And I thought it was very interesting this two-parter, connecting us with Count Dooku's homeworld of Seranno. So going back to the planet that we've seen several different times in Clone Wars episodes, that we know well from expanded universe stuff as far as like books go, comic books go, and getting to sort of see like a new, like here's Seranno in the aftermath of Count Dooku and the Clone Wars as the Empire is rising up. So we'll talk about those things. We'll get into the nitty gritty. Well, I don't know. There's not a lot of depth and nitty grittiness to get into necessarily with the Bad Batch thus far. There's not we're not connecting to a lot of overarching things. We're very much building our own mythology for the Bad Batch in the series, which I think is one of the nice elements of the show, is that we don't have to connect a lot of dots. We don't have to sort of pull up layers and layers of minutia to connect it to Star Wars in 17 different sort of spiderweb like tapestries. No. The Bad Batch is building its own mythology and is connecting its dots very plainly. And I don't mean that as a disservice to the show, because I like the way they're connecting those dots. It's just it's a show you can just watch, though. That's the joy of it, right? You can just watch the Bad Batch and you get everything they're doing. I like that. I appreciate that. I respect that. So thank you to the Bad Batch team for that very, very much. Let's go ahead and we'll talk about these two episodes. I'm going to try and talk about them in order, and we'll see how I do with that. You know how I get a little excited sometimes, and I dive into the second one before I finish the first one, and vice versa. I'll do my best, but you know what that means. It's time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
I know why you agreed to this mission, but we can do better things with Dooku's fortune than hide, Hunter. With what we're up against, we have to be prepared to fight. That means numbers and weapons. That's not the kind of life this kid deserves. Our lives are like this because of Omega. Taking her off Kamino was the right thing to do, but there are others out there who need our help. We've seen what the Empire's doing throughout the galaxy. We should be doing more.
So that conversation right there between Hunter and Echo on their way to Seranno sort of sets in motion a lot of the events for this two-part episode, particularly on Omega's end, as she overhears this conversation and decides to assume a lot of responsibility for securing a lot of treasure from the war chest, right? She wants to these are her friends, this is her family. She wants to help them get their freedom this way and not be the cause of them living paycheck to paycheck, if it were, as it were. And sets the plans in motion for this episode. But also, what Echo's saying to Hunter, I view as very much a mission statement for what season 2 of this show is going to be. And that'll be the realization, like, that Hunter will have to come to, that, yeah, the Empire is something that we have to be fighting against. Running and hiding to protect Omega is a nice thought, but people are suffering in the galaxy, and the Bad Batch has the skills, and maybe if they can get this war chest, or at least a portion of this war chest, they'll have the means to fight for these people and to fight against the tyranny and oppression. And it's the beginning of a lot of the stuff that we've seen that leads to the rebellion, obviously, and something that was explored in more depth and far more of a stark, harsh reality in Andor, obviously. But it's nice to see these notes here. And Echo, again, remember, Echo is the adopted member of the Bad Batch. He was not the genetic mistake that the other members were, seemingly. He's spent more time in the trenches, and I think he has a very different perspective than Hunter and Wrecker and Tech and even Crosshair as from a certain point. It'll be interesting to see what Crosshair thinks when we get to reconnect with him down the road, because I think when we left him in Season 1, he was just kind of beginning to see what was going on with the Empire, and that maybe it's not the best place for him to be as well. So we'll get to explore that at a certain point. But yeah, that conversation, like I said, I think it has a bit of a double meaning here. Sort of our mission statement for Season 2, but at the same time, it's what drives Omega to do the things she does in this two-part episode in sort of the relentless pursuit of the war chest and the treasures that it contains, and that leads us to a very Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade moment in the second part. We'll talk about that when we get to it. But you already know what I'm talking about. You already do. I know you do. The episode starts off. Let's go back a little bit. Start off. We find ourselves on a very pretty beachy coastal planet. We've seen these opening shots from the trailer for season 2 of the Bad Batch. They have acquired some sort of treasure chest of something or others, of goodies that probably at Sid's request, and they are now being pursued by giant crab-like creatures. Not quite clear if they have some sort of sentience, but they are seemingly very protective of whatever it is Wrecker is hauling off the beach with Hunter, and it's a fun way to kick off the show. It's a great action sequence. You have you have Tech and Omega on the ship. They're doing like a little bit of fishing. They're killing time. They're waiting to see what happens. It's a really fun sequence while Hunter, Echo, and Wrecker are being pursued by the giant crab creatures. And then the crab creatures attack the ship, and eventually our teams make their heroic getaway. I like that sort of adventurous cold open for the show. It sets a nice tone for it. It kind of reconnects us to our characters in a very Fast and Furious kind of way. Not Fast and Furious as in the movies, just in a very fast, quick-paced way. So I like that quite a bit. And then we go back to Ord Mantell. We catch up with Sid, and we meet a new character played by Wanda Sykes in this episode. And I have not read through the credits of this episode, which I meant to do initially, but I just want to talk about that conversation so badly. So let me do that real quick before we talk about Wanda Sykes and her character, all right? This is Season 2 of The Bad Batch, Episode 1, Spoils of War. Obviously, we're referring to the pillaging of Dooku's pillaging. The war chest he's amassed over his years as the leader of the Separatists. And our original air date is January 4th, 2023. This episode is written by Jennifer Corbett, directed by Stuart Lee. Our plot, the Bad Batch plans a risky heist. There you go. Nailed it in one. Our cast, D. Bradley Baker is the Bad Batch. Michelle Ang is Omega. Ben Diskin returns as AZI-3. Rhea Perlman is Sid. And, of course, Wanda Sykes is a new character, Fee Genoa. And we find out that Fee is a pirate. And she has tipped Sid off to what the Empire is doing on Seranno, clearing out Dooku's treasure trove of pillage items, not just from the other Separatist worlds, but as we find out later in I think it's in the second episode, he's also pillaged his own planet to fill the coffers of war. And I suspect, I'm probably not going out on a limb here, that this will not be the last time we see Fee Genoa in an episode. I suspect that her path and the Bad Batch will be her and the Bad Batch will be crossing paths at some point, probably in the very near future. Hunter's reaction to a pirate is, of course, what you would expect from a Republic trooper. Doesn't look kindly on them. But again, the Bad Batch is learning all kinds of new things. They have a very new lifestyle. And initially, Hunter is against going after Seranno, but is eventually persuaded, as we talked about already. So no need to cover that ground. Getting to Seranno, once we're on Seranno, again, the show sort of sticks with its formula from Season 1, at least in these early episodes of Season 2, which is very mission-based. Each episode, with the exception of this two-parter, is going to be a new mission, a new element, a new way for the Bad Batch to show us, as an audience, what's going on in the now Imperial-controlled worlds. So going back to Seranno in that sense, again, as I sort of touched on before, a place that we are familiar with. And now seeing the aftermath of them being Count Dooku's, basically the capital of this, not officially the capital of the Separatist movement, but it was Dooku's capital. It was Dooku's planet. It was Dooku's place, and they have been punished for that, despite the fact that Dooku was calling the shots. And as we are sort of led to believe in the second episode, not everyone agreed with Dooku and what he was up to and what he was doing. They just had to roll with it. That's just the way it was. That's what was going on. They weren't calling the shots. And so we see Castle Seranno, again, a place we have visited in Star Wars The Clone Wars. We've seen it depicted in multiple episodes of that show, in comics, in novels. But what we see below the castle is the town. And I don't think it's the capital of Seranno, which is Carenia, I believe is how you pronounce the capital of Seranno. I don't think this is what we're seeing here, but this is definitely the town below the village. I'm sorry, below the castle, and it's been completely bombed out by Imperial bombardment. Now, is the rest of the planet, are the rest of the cities on Seranno equally devastated and destroyed? Possibly. We don't know for sure. The planet looks fine from the few shots we get going into orbit, but how many cities are left standing as punishment for their role in the Clone Wars? I guess is sort of the question that we don't have any immediate answers to. But interesting to see the punishment that was doled out by the Empire against Seranno. So we go to the castle. They survey the scene. Hunter's going to be on watch. Wrecker, Echo, Tech, and Omega are going to go in to retrieve treasure. Now, actually, I should pause it for a quick moment and go back to the beginning of the episode, that cold open that we got. One of the elements I really liked about that cold open was Omega being extremely capable. Really good with that. I already forgot the name of it. That sort of electron crossbow that she has. I know I'm using the wrong name. I lost my note. I apologize. But you know exactly what I'm talking about. Being much more proficient with her weaponry, much more confident, having learned a lot from being around the Bad Batch, is now much more formidable despite her age and her stature. So I love seeing that. And I love seeing that, again, they cleared this up at the end of season 1. They couldn't spend their time protecting Omega all the time. Like, she's part of the team or she's not, and she's clearly part of the team. So Hunter has no problem sending her into the field with Echo and Tech and Wrecker to retrieve part of the war chest. So I like seeing that element in play here, kind of keeping those threads in place that we had established at the end of season 1. So it was really, really nice stuff. But of course, things go awry. There's a huge Imperial presence on Seranno, so this was going to be a hard mission to achieve off the get-go. So of course things go awry, especially after Wrecker stuns one of the clones, and then that clone misses his check-in time, and so the Imperials know something is amiss, and that sets everything off. Despite Hunter's diversion, everyone gets detected. Half our team gets trapped on one of the ships. Wrecker makes it off with one trunk of treasure, but they quickly have to abandon it so they can try and save Echo, Tech, and Omega, who are now trapped on the container ship that's about to be leaving orbit. So that's no good. But we go back and forth between Omega, Tech, and Echo on the ship, being extremely capable, as they have shown themselves being in the past, and sort of being able to free themselves by stowing away in the cargo container, releasing from the cargo ship, and knowing that those cargo containers have maneuvering thrusters so that they can land back on the surface of the planet. And this is something that they know because Hunter and the rest of the Bad Batch has had Omega studying and learning about ship types and ship classes and what they're capable of, learning all their systems and how these things work. So it's Omega who realizes that once the Imperials are aware of their presence on the ship and they deploy all the escape pods so that they can't leave, it's Omega who comes up with the plan. And Tech is like, yeah, hey, you're right. Good job. You've been studying, blah, blah, blah. Great stuff. Meanwhile, Hunter and Wrecker, who were unable to get back on the ship to save their friends and teammates, make their way into the castle, into very familiar trappings, into very familiar territory of Dooku's throne room, basically. Again, a room we've seen several times on Star Wars: The Clone Wars, but look at it now. It's run down, dilapidated, broken glass. The consoles don't work. But it's a great place for a shootout against Imperial forces. Eventually, Wrecker and Hunter make their escape, and they're going to lead the Imperials on a pursuit through that bombed-out city. Wrecker's going to turn himself into a bit of a tank by grabbing a giant cannon, while Omega, Echo, and Tech make their way back to the surface of the planet on one of these cargo containers. But they don't know where these containers are going to go. So the team's very spread out across Seranno. And that is, by and large, the first episode of the show. The Imperials are in pursuit. They know that they are there. And the clone commander, in this case, seems to be pretty sure that this is Clone Force 99, despite rumors to the contrary that they are dead. And we will pick up on that thread in part 2, in episode 2 of the season. So I think we're at a good place to stop talking about this episode, because I guess the thing I want to hammer home about this episode here is that Omega is the one who seems really driven to get as much of this war chest as possible. She feels responsible for the Bad Batch in the situation of being, living paycheck to paycheck, doing these missions for Sid, and not kind of being able to do the things that they think they need to be doing, or at least from that conversation that Hunter and Echo have at the beginning of the show, what Echo thinks they should be doing to help the cause, to help people that are now beginning to feel the boot of tyranny on their throats. So Echo is very driven to get as much of this war chest as possible, and that continues into the second episode as that container crashes, is in a perilous position. Omega won't let it go. She has to get that trove. She has to help her friends, her family, get out of the situation they're in, because she's now heard one of them say that it's her fault that they're in it. And Echo doesn't mean it that way. I think we all know that Echo doesn't mean it the way that it sounded. But again, Omega's a kid, and she hears what she hears, and she's burdened by responsibility, right? So that's what is driving her in these episodes of the show, and we really see it play out nicely in the second episode. So I think now is a good point to transition to that second episode, where we're gonna meet. Let's go ahead and do our cast and credits right now. So episode 2 is titled "Ruins of War." Again, original air date January 4th, 2023. Written by Gina Lucita Monreal, directed by Nathaniel Villanueva. Our plot: the Bad Batch must decide who to trust as they plan their escape. Our cast on this episode, again, D. Bradley Baker is the Bad Batch. Michelle Ang is Omega. Hector Alonso joins the cast this week as Roma Adele, a character that we get to spend more time with, and who provides us with some context to what's going on Seranno. And again, sort of helps put Seranno in a different light from what the clones had initially thought of it, during wartime, as sort of like an enemy state. And we also get the return of Nasir Jalal as Vice Admiral Rampart in this episode as well. So let's kind of set the stage here, right? Hunter and Wrecker are still being pursued by Imperial forces, trying to get back to the ship, trying to reunite with the rest of the batch. Omega, Echo, and Tech have crashed on the planet. Their container was on a cliff. It tumbles down the cliff. They eventually make their escape, and they find their way to a local. Now, again, the Empire is in hot pursuit of all these missing containers, so there's Imperial presence throughout. Throughout the tossing and turning of the container, a crate breaks loose and smashes down on Echo's leg. I'm sorry, not on Echo, on Tech's leg, giving him a fracture. He's very aware, very attuned to his body, so he knows he has a fracture of his tibia. I believe he even says it out loud. They find themselves in the woods, where they stumble across a local who's hiding in the woods himself from Imperial bombardment, and they kind of forcibly go back to his place to hide out. He doesn't put up much of a fight. He's not armed. This is this kind of kindly old man living out in the woods, trying to preserve the memories of Seranno and what the people were like before they were cast as sort of these galactic villains in the Clone Wars. So I want to play, as we transition here fully into episode 2, I want to play a nice conversation between Romar Adele and Tech as Tech sort of helps him preserve a piece of Seranno's culture. Check it out.
Hey, Ace. Think you can lend me that spanner on your belt for a minute?
What are you doing with a Model 2 data core?
This here contains a fragment of my people's history. Our culture, art, music, memories.
A separatist archive. Fascinating.
Not separatist. Serenian. We did exist before the war, you know.
I never thought of it like that.
Now, if I can only get this thing working.
Oh, I can handle that.
So, we spent a lot of time with Echo, Omega, and Tech in this episode. Wrecker and Hunter, they're still being pursued by the Imperials. They're going to break that encirclement. They're going to get back to the ship, and they're going to meet up with their team. But they're on a very straight line, right? So their path makes a lot of sense. One of the really strong elements of these 2 episodes to start the season with is the way that Omega is now connecting with other members of the team, and that we're starting to see that. We saw that in the first episode of this season, her spending time with Tech, going through the manuals and studying, learning, and connecting more with the other members of the team. Season 1 focused so much on Omega spending time with Hunter that it almost seemed like the rest of the team didn't even have a relationship with Omega to any sort of real extent that we saw. We saw her connect with Wrecker at points. We saw her connect, tangentially with the other characters at a certain point. The only common ground they seemed to share was like A, their genetics, but B, that her being captured and killed by the Imperials was wrong, so they were going to protect her. Thus far in season 2, we're sort of changing the dynamic of the show, where it's less about Omega and Hunter's relationship, as it is about now Omega connecting with the rest of the team and us getting to see it, us getting to see how that's working out. And of course, with Tech, it's much more of a student-teacher relationship. That seems more appropriate for Tech's personality type to begin with. This episode, we're going to see her connecting with Echo here. And remember, it's Echo's words to Hunter in that first episode that sort of drive her, push her to getting as much of the war chest as possible. That sort of puts her in a lot of danger here. So when we that conversation that we just heard between Tech and Adnar, Echo's out scouting the location, making sure the Imperials aren't onto them. So he's already off the premises. But now Tech is preoccupied with a technological problem, and this allows Echo to very easily leave the premises of Romar Adel and make her way back to the cargo container. Again, the cargo container in a very perilous position, off the side of a cliff, resting basically on trees and maybe a couple of sturdy rocks. But it's going to go at any minute. It's going to go. But she is just compelled, obsessed, just driven to get as much of that war chest as possible to help her friends, to help her family live the better life, right? One that she's now feels that she's responsible for the situation that they're in. As of course is going to happen, the Empire was not going to let these cargo containers go. They're attempting to account for every single one of them that's crashed down to the surface of Seranno. And so it was only a matter of time before they find this one. And of course they find this one as our friend Omega is in a perilous position and Echo's trying to get her out of it. This causes the container to be shifting around, moving steadily down the side of the mountain, getting more and more dangerous as time goes, as the battle above erupts, as Echo attempts to hold them off with his broken leg. And Hunter and Wrecker are attempting to evade Imperial pursuit. So a lot of really good action, a lot of high tension stuff here. But this is that Indiana Jones moment that I'm talking about coming up right here. I want to go ahead and play this between Omega and Echo. As the container has shifted, Omega has fallen off the ladder. They were making their ascent up to get out of the cargo container when it shifted, and she fell, and her backpack full of loot spilled all over the place. Let's check it out.
Hurry! This whole ledge is gonna go!
I can get it back. I have to.
Don't! Omega, forget about the war chest. It's not important.
Yes, it is. I heard what you said to Hunter on the Marauder. You don't have a normal life because of me.
Omega, listen to me. Please. You have to let it go. Come on!
And she listens. And they're gonna get out. But again, this is one of these formative moments for Omega too. Omega 2. That sounded weird. That sounds like a weird vitamin. But for Omega to have to learn, right? She's still dealing with a lot of things, and finding her role in this team, her place in it, and again, she just wants to be the best teammate, best family member she can be in this case. But yeah, I couldn't help but think of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. You know, when Henry Jones Sr. finally calls his son Indiana and tells him to let it go. That's the only thing I could think of. Maybe not quite as powerful a moment on this episode of The Bad Batch, but that's where my head went, and that's just how I roll, and you all know that already. So now I want to go ahead and kind of play the resolution between Omega and Echo, because again, it just follows up on the threads. Everything we're talking about, this just kind of connects the dots and lays it all out there in a way that I think Echo has to learn too, that he needs to be able to talk to Omega directly. You know, she's part of this now. She's in the mix, and trying to keep things from her, keep things behind her back. This is what gets people into trouble. Let's hear them have their conversation again and again. Have this nice moment where these two characters who didn't interact a ton in season 1 get to have their moment.
I'm sorry we lost the war chest.
We'll manage without it.
I wanted to make things better for us. I know you all gave up everything because of me.
Good thing we did, or we might be fighting for the Empire right now. Or worse. We made the right choice, Omega. I'd do it all again.
So there you have it. That's the good stuff right there between these two characters. And now we transition to the fallout, and this is like sort of the first time in this two-parter of season 2 where we pull back and we sort of look at the galaxy at large here a little bit more, and we begin to pick up some threads from season 1. Because again, remember, Tarkin had charged Vice Admiral Rampart with destroying Clone Force 99. Rampart believed he did, and now there may be some evidence to the contrary. And again, I like how this plays out quite a bit. So let's go ahead and check out this scene and close out the episode.
As of now, we've recovered 85% of the war chests. But I'll chase that number to perfection, sir.
Your failure to ensure the transfer of this cargo is not why I am here. I've come to address some inaccuracies in your mission report.
What inaccuracies?
You stated the would-be thieves you encountered were the rogue clones from Experimental Unit 99. Yet that is impossible. Their squad perished during the fall of Taboka City.
Your intel was incorrect, sir. I had visual confirmation on 2 of them. They're alive.
I see. If Governor Tarkin were to learn of my misstep, then I would be at risk. And that cannot happen. Which is why a new report will be submitted. One void of any mention of Clone Force 99.
Sir, I will not falsify an official report.
I understand. I will.
So Rampart's out there covering up his reports, protecting his hiney. Again, you see the integrity of the clones, even the ones who are now working for the Empire, still have integrity, right? Like they still believe in what they're doing. But we know Rampart. Rampart wants to replace the clones. He finds them obsolete. He wants the conscripted forces, to be the new stormtroopers of the Empire. And obviously he's going to get his wish at some point. But it's going to be fun to kind of see that play out, right? As Rampart continues his plan of bringing in conscripted forces, of retiring clones, putting them out to pasture, if you will. Is he just going to kill them? Are they going to let him loose in the Empire? I mean, it's sort of an interesting thing to ponder. I mean, we've seen bits and pieces of clones in these dark times. Obviously the animated series picks them up pretty strongly, but we did get the Tamara Morrison cameo in the Kenobi series as a down on his luck, out of work, out of soldiering, clone living on the streets. So I'm really intrigued by what the future holds for the clones that are still in Imperial service. So there's a lot of ground I think we're gonna get to cover in season 2, and I'm really, really excited for it. I think these two episodes, they're about 7.5 buckets. Is sort of my initial feel for both of them. They're really strong episodes. They're very enjoyable episodes of the show. But it's just sort of kind of wetting our beaks a little bit for what's to come here in season 2. I think they're setting up a few things. We sort of get our mission statement about, hey, we need to be doing more for the people of the galaxy, not just trying to lay low and hide from the Empire and protect Omega. Like, we have skills, and we need to be out there doing things and making a difference. How long will their employee with Sid last in this season? Sid seems to see the writing on the wall that eventually the Empire will come to Ord Mantell and shut her down. Obviously, we now get a new character in Wanda Sykes' Fee Genoa. What will their role with her be? What will their relationship with her be? Let's kind of see what trouble she gets them into, or the trouble they get her into, which could be the case. And again, going back to Rampart's plans, like watching the way the Empire, the transition from the Republic to the Empire. This is going to be a fascinating process. Look at what we saw in this episode here. You had those cargo container ships, and the escort ships weren't TIE fighters. We're not there yet. We're still doing it with a lot of familiar iconography and imagery and ships from the Galactic Republic era. This transition period, I think, is going to be a lot of fun to kind of get to see the bits and pieces kind of come together to shape the Star Wars that we all know so well from the original trilogy. So I'm excited. I'm delighted. And I'm excited and delighted that you're all here for the ride with me on Season 2 of Star Wars The Bad Batch. And I can't wait to talk to you next week about another excellent episode. Remember, this is the Mandovision Podcast. My name is Tom. And I do thank you once again for checking out and supporting small independent Star Wars podcasts like this one. Reach out to me on social media. I'm at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Email me. You can do that too. MandovisionTom@gmail.com. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, following, and sharing this show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. We will be back next week for another exciting installment of Star Wars The Bad Batch. We can't wait to see you here. I like doing the show, and I like knowing that you're listening. So thank you for doing that. This podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.